This sitting is resumed. Prior to the suspension for lunch, this Honourable Chamber was debating the Economic Partnership Agreement Bill 2019. To that, we resume. Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I first of all want to register my support for this bill before the House and to lend a word of congratulation to the Minister in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade who piloted this bill, and to the staff of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade and the Minister substantive in the other place, because, Mr. Speaker, the government of Barbados has moved with alacrity in order to position itself in a way that ensures that we have a legal construct within which we engage with one of our principal trade partners, the United Kingdom, even as it finds itself in the throes of exiting the European Union. The Economic Partnership Agreement as proposed with the United Kingdom, and the Honourable Minister has said this, will be mirroring the European Union CARIFORUM trade agreement almost exactly. And it is vitally important, sir, that we maintain a relationship with the United Kingdom, because, I mean, obviously we all know that that has been the, I hate to use the term, but colonial mother country. But it is also, sir, in a legitimate sense, the doorway. It was the doorway for Barbados to enter the European Union. The natural historical links, the cultural links between the two countries, the ongoing nature of the relationship between our countries, especially in the area of our touristic endeavors. Mr. Speaker, sir, it was a natural focal point for us to be able to enter the European Union via the threshold or the doorway of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom having departed or being in the process of departing due to Brexit, it is vitally important that we maintain the trade relationship we have with her, and that we do so within the four corners of a proper legal construct. But this debate, sir, is more than that. I begin on that point because it sets the framework, sir, that must govern that which we must now do. But any serious analysis of trade, sir, sees foreign trade almost as having a bird's eye view from a treetop, looking down at the totality of the landscape of the country's economy. And the challenge that we now have in Barbados, the difficulties that every single man, woman, and child endure in this country today, Mr. Speaker, sir, cannot be divorced from foreign trade and failures in foreign trade by the last administration. The reality is that we have come to a point in Barbados where our economy, obviously fragile as it is, has been forced to undergo unnecessary levels of stress and human sacrifice. Your constituents and mine, Mr. Speaker, sir. People who went and voted for you, sir. People who went and voted for me. Those who voted against us, all together are being forced to undergo levels of sacrifice at a personal and human level that they ought not properly to have had to go through. And why? The country, sir, should by now be able to look back at a period of time within which we had an arrangement with the European Union, sir, and be able to say that we can point to development which came as a result of our ability to build up capacity in essential areas. My ministry, for example, sir, is now charged with doing that which previous administrations would have considered to be unthinkable, but it is necessary for us to have a concessionaire come in for 30 years to invest in Grantley Adams International Airport, because the airport built in 1976, sir, is now like an old bag. It is bursting out at the seams. Carrying capacity of 1,200 people in a terminal does not make sense when there are 1,600 people in the terminal at peak time. You have to expand the capacity. You have, Mr. Speaker, sir, to reinvest, but you cannot do so because you cannot borrow because you are broke. We ought not to be there, but that is where we are, the Bridgetown Port, Mr. Speaker, sir. We can't point to capacity that has been built out at the Bridgetown Port, but all of us eat food as a result of the fact that the food coming through the port. All of us do business, sir, sit down on furniture as a result of things that come through the port. Our houses are furnished as a result of that. But, sir, the port cannot do that which it should be able ordinarily to do because it is still struggling, sir, with the constraints, not only of bad administrative management by the last administration, but the constraints, sir, of failure to do those things necessary to build up capacity. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have to understand that all of us in the Caribbean are in the same boat when it comes to small islands, economies of scale, Mr. Speaker, or natural vulnerability to economic shocks. And there is a philosophical reason, and this is my point of departure, there's a philosophical reason why this debate matters, above and beyond just simply saying there's an economic partnership with Europe. Because that don't mean nothing to anybody sitting down in a minibus out there right now in the bus stand. What matters, Mr. Speaker, sir, is to understand that this is yet another stage in what is really a form of integration of economies. And why are we seeking to continue to place emphasis on integrating economies, sir? Because of the fact that regional integration, for example, what we have done with the Caribbean single market and economy, and what the Democratic Labour Party sought to undo or failed to advance, is because, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is a vital and essential part of the developmental toolkit for small, open economies like ours. Coming, therefore, sir, coming face to face with a number of constraints, as I said, of smallness of size. Constraints, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we can do nothing about. Our geographical location alone is a constraint. One hurricane, one earthquake, Mr. Speaker, does damage to an entire island economy. We have seen it right across the Caribbean repeatedly, bringing an economy to a standstill for months. Similar impact on a coastal town in the United States of America. Just a question of geography and size. Completely different implications for that country. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, the merging of economies is a critical part of the toolkit for development. Philosophically as well, I say that the useful thing about the European Union relationship with CARIFORUM, which is CSME plus the Dominican Republic, and that is the original economic partnership agreement. And because Great Britain has dropped out of the picture, we now have to build a similar relationship with Great Britain in order to maintain our relationship with her, and on the same terms as we did with Europe. But the reality is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that where we were before philosophically was useful because it presented interesting challenges on one hand, but equally interesting opportunities for our development as a people, sir. And specifically, I speak about the new levels of political ambition that were introduced to right-thinking political leaders when we left government in 2007, Mr. Speaker. I left the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. We signed the economic partnership in 2007. We committed this country and this region to a working relationship with Europe, not because of the fact that we felt that little Barbados could go and fight up alongside Germany as an equal, or alongside the Netherlands as an equal, or alongside France as an equal. Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, we understood that there is a European element in the Caribbean, that there is a St. Martin, that there is, Mr. Speaker, sir, a Martinique, and a Guadeloupe, and several other territories and departments, the French will call it Département des Outre-mer, overseas territories, Mr. Speaker, sir, where we as Barbadian people doing business have not been able to penetrate those neighboring regional markets. But where we have wonderful bounties of opportunity that are untapped, underexplored, if explored at all, that our people, Mr. Speaker, have competitive and comparative advantages because of investment made by successive governments through the years. For example, tertiary and secondary education. Don't mind that the last administration sought to roll back that. For example, Mr. Speaker, sir, a superior quality of health care that can compete globally. Don't mind the last administration sought to undermine a lot of that. Mr. Speaker, sir, that we felt that we could be putting our people in a position where they could penetrate regional markets and then be able to have Barbadian business, Barbadian product, Barbadian services being sold across borders within those territories which are not part of this English-speaking Caribbean, but which, sir, are nonetheless part of the Caribbean. That makes sense to you, Mr. Speaker, sir? It makes sense to me, but it didn't make sense to the people who preceded us. And so therefore, Mr. Speaker, we came to a point where the last administration, and I heard the Honourable Member for St. James South, who piloted this bill, make this argument, they squandered a development opportunity and did not see trade or the economic partnership agreement as a tool for development. They, sir, became paralyzed with the economic challenges of their own making. Because I hear a lot about they used to use an excuse, oh, there was a global economic recession. Well, when many countries around the world had gotten past that, they were still struggling. Reality is, sir, bad policy, bad politics in Barbados. That's the root of the problem. But then, sir, we also were put in a situation where we did not capitalize on opportunities that could help us build out the kind of financial success that we should have. And that meant, sir, that we could not help our small businesses to adapt to ever-changing economic circumstances globally. We did not, Mr. Speaker, sir, put our own revenue structures. The central government is today, sir, still fighting to overcome a dependency on trade-related revenue. When the rest of the world is moving to liberalization, and that you raise your revenue, sir, from transactions, not at the point of the border, saying don't bring that in here unless I could tax it for all it's worth and cap the cost of living for the people who I represent and make life harder for them in the supermarket. Mr. Speaker, sir, that is the blinkered mentality of the Shortian, Frundle Shortian, Christopher Sinclairian thinking.
Some new words, sir. You're using some new words, sir.
People around the world.
I remember using some new words, some adverbs and adjectives to know.
Yes, sir, and only an adjective, not referring to any particular individuals. And Mr. Speaker, sir, people around the world had moved past that approach to taxation. They understood that transactions generating commercial activity, generating productivity, generating growth, sir, that was the way in which then you can have an economy financing its well-being and its development. And Mr. Speaker, sir, therefore, trade was not seen as a tool, a part of a toolkit for development. And where did that leave us? It left us, in my judgment, Mr. Speaker, sir, bereft of a number of opportunities, both on the economic side and on the social side. On the economic side, Mr. Speaker, sir, I say without fear of contradiction that one of the worst things that it did, that the Democratic Labour Party did, in the way in which they mangled and mismanaged the economic partnership agreement with Europe and gave no leadership. That's the other problem. Gave no leadership in the Caribbean. Because, sir, let us not fool ourselves. We're not just talking about one country being able to do it all by themselves in a partnership agreement. But there must be leadership. Without leadership, it will all fail. We know on this side what it was to have had a lead prime minister with responsibility for implementing the single market and economy, and he worked relentlessly day and night in order to carry it to where it was and make it the success it was when the Labour Party left office. We know now what it is to have a prime minister with lead responsibility for the integration of the single market and economy, and she works day and night and a little over, don't wish you find the extra time, in order, sir, to carry the process forward. But then we came to a standstill. One man got sick and passed away, and Lord have mercy on his soul. And then the other one could as well have passed away because he was only visible. He was inert. And the reality is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that on the economic side, critical developmental things were left unattended. So that disciplines that should be built into any modern economy were not dealt with. Sanitary and phytosanitary requirements, sir, simply is a technical way of saying that there has to be food safety, there got to be animal and plant health, hygiene, and safety regulations. The technical people will say sanitary, phytosanitary requirements. But you're talking, sir, about food safety and animal and plant health regulations. For safety. Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, we all know that if we had adequate standards of food safety, then you're able to take that which you produce and sell it across borders anywhere in the world without anybody putting up a trade barrier to say you can't sell it to us because we ain't sure what standards you have in Barbados. But to this day, Mr. Speaker, sir, you want to understand why it hurts us economically what the Democratic Labour Party did? Because, Mr. Speaker, sir, to this day, our fishing fleet is the largest fishing fleet to be found anywhere in the Eastern Caribbean, the most experienced fishermen and fisherfolk in the Eastern Caribbean, Mr. Speaker, sir, but you can't take a fish caught in the waters of Barbados and export it anywhere into Europe. Why? Because we have not taken, and the records of this house, sir, are now exhausted and exhaustive. Exhausted, ED, and exhaustive, IVE. With my having said this, that in Dominica and in other parts of the Caribbean, they have taken markets that are open air like ours. But say, man, you can't got flies all over the place, so we enclose it. You want to maintain a certain minimal temperature so that the fish don't move off of ice and come to room temperature and go back on ice again. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, they put in minimal temperature requirements, and they are followed in those marketplaces. You know that blood on wood, Mr. Speaker, sir, on the wood board, if you're cutting up the meat, will leave stains, and after a period of time, it will secrete into the grain of the wood, and it can't be the purest thing in the world, sir. So, therefore, you put down steel basins and steel tables. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, that is how an economy develops. And it costs money. The developmental aid was available from the European Union since 2008 until 2018, Mr. Speaker, sir, when the left government, and they did nothing. There's not a man out there, woman or child, who can point to a fish market that has been developed in Barbados. Not one. Not one. For 10 years. And then they say it's not a lost decade. Well, then what is it? But the reality is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that is a failing in the sanitary and phytosanitary realm. A vital discipline for any modern economy. Because if you don't have the things that it takes to make sure you can sell your product, then, Mr. Speaker, sir, your people are bereft of foreign exchange. Which explains why, when foreign exchange was hemorrhaging in this country, they knew not what to do. Which explains why your constituents, Mr. Speaker, sir, then had to feel suffering in their homes. That's how it links it all. It links itself one to the other to the other. Not satisfied, the Democratic Labour Party turned a blind eye and a deaf ear to competition policy. Why do you need to have competition policy constantly being reviewed? The Honourable Member for St. Michael North, sir, presided over when he was in the Labour Party administration of 1994 through to 2008. He presided over a suite of legislation that created for the first time consumer protection in Barbados, create a fair trade commission. But Mr. Speaker, sir, around the region, there are not many countries that have that. We led then, but then we failed to lead after. And so therefore, you're trading in CARICOM with some countries that have consumer protection and fair trade legislation and others that do not. You have one person uphill, the other person down the hill. You don't have an equal playing field. You've got to find a way to deal with things, Mr. Speaker, relating to administration and investigation of complaints made by consumers. How can there be fairness in the market if you're not constantly reviewing and revising these rules? When do you ever recall hearing the former Prime Minister or Minister of Finance in this country under the last administration, sir, speak to those issues? I dare say, sir, you never heard it because it did not happen. And that is the reason why we have the stagnation in the region that we are now fighting to break away from. And Mr. Speaker, sir, on the social side, we can't talk about integration and progress via trade and integration unless we talk about how our people are elevated, are moved forward. But Mr. Speaker, sir, how can you be moving your people forward on a regional platform when a man is told that he can move to another country in order to work, but his common law spouse with whom he lived all his life, with whom he made love every night faithfully too, but she can't come nowhere with him because you choose not to recognize her as a spouse? It happens in the Caribbean to this day because no leadership has been given to the issue. There are some, sir, who say that they are not moving the process forward because it don't suit them. That's the position in Jamaica right now on that issue. And Mr. Speaker, sir, you can't have a region that works that way. It requires, sir, a level of leadership. But it didn't happen under the last administration. And part of what we were trying to do with the European Union, sir, was to deepen the pace of integration, deepen the scope of the integration, so that by adding in the Dominican Republic, you carry us to the threshold of Latin America and the Caribbean, you carry us to the doorway of Europe and the Caribbean, and Mr. Speaker, sir, you invoke a need now, an urgency to go after the improvement of the disciplines that help make your economy work better and your society become a fairer place. Mr. Speaker, I want to make it this thing simple. We can have a Barbados that functioned effectively if you could not move from where you live, sir, to next door to where I live and bring your wife or your common law spouse.
Not my common law spouse.
One.
Not my common law spouse, I remember. My wife.
Your wife. But sir, you for it to work, you have to see the several countries as one marketplace. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the challenge that we had conceptually was that we were talking about being in an economic partnership, but making no progress towards advancing it. And what is worse, that must be said, is that we were given a window of opportunity for 8 years, during which the European Union said, look, y'all are at a lesser level of development than we are economically. Take a little time. Put your house in order. We are not going to seek to penetrate your markets with any goods or with any services. We're not competing against you. Our firms are far more powerful and far more advanced. And you know this, Mr. Speaker, sir. A small law firm in England might go in 40 lawyers. A large law firm in Barbados has a maximum of 20, 15. Yeah? I don't know of any that got 40. So the reality is, Mr. Speaker, sir, they say we ain't coming to carry away your opportunities. Take a little time and do the things you have to do to get your house in order. Tell me, sir, anything that happened under the Democratic Labour Party. to get the house in Barbados in order. Tell me anything that you saw as leadership of the region by the Democratic Labour Party, sir. So we come back to the point that they failed us, and having failed us, we must now begin almost afresh in this opportunity we have with the United Kingdom, at least to salvage a little piece of that which it continues to exist by way of opportunity. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are here to bring into legal effect an economic partnership agreement that must have legal effect and enforcement by law. And that is one of the other things that the Democratic Labour Party disappointed this country on. A failure to understand that you have, even though it was part of the law of Barbados, the failure to understand they have legal obligations to your people. First of all, not to any foreign firm coming to do business here. You have a legal obligation to your people to empower them and facilitate their ability to compete. That was where the first legal obligation lay. And Mr. Speaker, sir, from as far back as 1964 in the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, it was made clear that developing countries did not have to reciprocate on terms in reduction of trade barriers. That position taken in 64, sir, was then fortified by the Tokyo round of the General Agreement on Tariff of Trade, sir, in 1973, and they again reinforced the fact that we as developing countries did not have to reciprocate the obligations that the developed world had to us in terms, sir, of removing trade barriers. We then were fortunate enough to go into 4 successive Lomé agreements with the European community. 4. And Mr. Speaker, sir, it was really all about trade agreements with an element of aid interposed in between it, so as to help develop the colonial world, the post-colonial world in particular, and opportunities that would have been capitalized on by the Tom Adams regime, the Arab Bar regime, Erskine Sandiford regime, Mr. Speaker, sir. Everybody, there's only one administration in Barbados that failed to understand that building a good relationship with the European community and empowering your people as best you could within the ambit of the trade agreements, regulations. This is the last administration. They're the only one. And Mr. Speaker, sir, we therefore came to a point where we no longer enjoyed preferential market access to Europe. The history now is known by everybody. By 1986 to 94, you went into the Uruguay round of trade discussions. That is what created the World Trade Organization. But it did a number of other things. One, except for those countries that were then called lesser developed countries, all countries post-1986, were told that they had to start to adhere to the same rules and the same regulations and the same obligations as every other country in the world, unless you were a lesser developed country. And that really, sir, was the worst of the worst, the poorest of the poor. The ones who, sir, were broken and bankrupt. So middle-income developing countries like Barbados, and this is what I want you to understand, sir, and through you, your people, the people who are hearing us, the people who read what we say.
Honourable, just let me pause a minute. I seem to be hearing a disturbance, right? That seems to be a phone in nature. I don't know if it's emanating from his cell phone or if I'm hearing voices. I don't think I'm hearing voices.
I don't think so.
I think I'm hearing a cell phone. But I hope it's not emanating from people who ought to know better. And from people that I may have to put out of the chambers. Continue on, remember.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. So that between 86 and 94, sir, we were then brought to a point where it was made clear that unless you were, as I said, the most bankrupt and the poorest of the poor, if you were a middle-income developing country like Barbados is, sir, you then were standing in the shoes of a party that needed to be penalized. You were being effectively penalized by the international community for your success. And the reality is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we were then told we got to abide, don't mind the smallness of our size, the fragility of our economy, the vulnerability created by a number of factors, including our geographical location, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we have to abide by all the obligations to America or to France, that France and America or Canada would have to us. It did not matter, our vulnerability. But that had to be confronted. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other challenge that created as a result of that round of discussion was that we were all told that we have to adopt policies of non-discrimination against any other country. We had to adopt policies, Mr. Speaker, sir, of reciprocating in trade rules with every other country as an equal. That we had to treat all of them as though they were nationals here. And obviously, Mr. Speaker, sir, those things made no sense because it would wipe out small economies. And hence then the discussion in the WTO shifted to special and differential treatment for small economies such as ours. And Mr. Speaker, sir, you know, this is really where the pain comes about. Because as we did all of that, we were given another opportunity. That we could then trade, not only in goods, but in services. And if you understand the nature and the construction of a small economy, Mr. Speaker, sir, you understand that Barbados will never, don't care what you do, be able to compete globally in terms of sale of goods with anybody because, sir, we just simply don't have the resources. We don't have the natural resources, we don't have the manufacturing capacity, we don't have the industrial power. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, the golden opportunity is that you can trade in services because we have invested in our human being, our human capital. The social capital investment done by the governments of Barbados is probably second to none in most parts of the hemisphere. And Mr. Speaker, sir, that basically means, is a sophisticated way of saying we take a lot of money and spend on free secondary and tertiary education for people about this place to become lawyers and economists and doctors and accountants and whatever else. That they can have skills that they can sell not only within the four corners of Barbados, but across borders around the world, Mr. Speaker, sir. And that, sir, gave us an opportunity to have new access to new disciplines. Government procurement, sir. And why does it matter? Because, sir, we all know that, again, the last administration made itself very, very notorious about the absence of transparency in the way in which it went about doing things, government purchased goods and services from people. It is a discipline that economies, any modern economy around the world, must have transparency in the way in which you purchase goods and services once you are government. That the people who you say can tender for a contract should be able to know why they did not get the contract. They should know the basis for being excluded from the contract. And yes, in the European Union, even given a right of appeal. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, our law in Barbados never moved forward in that regard. People were excluded from contracts every day in this country and don't know why. I may know why. You may know why, or we may suspect why. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, we did not have the benefit of legislation that ensured that the economy had moved to another level. Mr. Speaker, sir, intellectual property and protection of people's intellectual property rights, their plans, their ideas, their trade secrets, those so-called intangible assets, sir, took no further steps. E-commerce legislation to ensure, Mr. Speaker, so that people better able to do things by way of the internet and so on. These were not issues of a developmental nature for the then administration. And sir, we then have come to the point where we are today. That services was liberalized under the Economic Partnership Agreement with Europe so that we can move all of our services, sir, in every category. There are 4 ways of moving services. If you wanted to do it, sir, like medical transcription and call centers, what you call cross-border, you're using electronic means only. We could do that with every one of the European protectorates in the Caribbean and with Europe itself. But nothing was ever done to promote that. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is a form of economic activity that did not matter to the last administration. We were told, sir, that we were unable to establish commercial presence. Tell me, sir, how many countries, how many companies in Barbados you know have been given incentives by their government of the day to be able to establish themselves in France or in Guadeloupe or in St. Martin or anywhere else in the Caribbean, sir? Tell me. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the movement of natural persons, so that people would be able then to go from place to place and provide the service. You, sir, being able to go and practice law in St. Martin or whatever, or wherever. And these are the developmental things that had to be done. Now, I don't know. What we have to deal with, sir, is the failure. And I said the opportunities. The honourable member may not be able to practice in St. Martin because he's not trained in Roman Dutch law, but there are some who are. And the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, sir, the opportunity is what we have to be able to create. But you know why we didn't create the opportunity, sir? Because the last administration was asleep at the wheel. So that mutual recognition agreements, the ability to say that if you went to the University of the West Indies and you studied history, it is recognized by the French as a degree from a reputable university, and therefore you could work or find occupation in one of their territories. The ability, Mr. Speaker, sir, for someone who went to the University of West Indies and studied economics or business to be able to say, I have a qualification, it is recognizable in some other part of the Caribbean that is not English speaking, and therefore, sir, it is an opportunity for a young man or woman to go and do what they wish to do in terms of selling the service.
I remember has 2 more minutes.
And Mr. Speaker, sir, if you do not empower your young people to be able to have that kind of access across the region, then you are stifling their creativity, stifling the opportunities for them, and Mr. Speaker, sir, by extension, stifling your own economic productivity and foreign exchange earning capacity. And that is the legacy of the last administration. I say to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, that, I mean, it gets worse. Financial services, cultural industries. The cultural industry sector, sir, was liberalized completely by the European unions. They did for us what they have done for no other entity on planet Earth. They said to us in the Caribbean, we will allow all of your entertainers and cultural practitioners, without exception, to be able to come and practice their trade in our territories, whether they be Dutch territories, French territories, Spanish-speaking territories, sir, you name it. And Mr. Speaker, sir, tell me, where have we gone? How have we empowered Lyric? How have we empowered, Mr. Speaker, sir, any of the ocean of young men and women that we see in entertainment every single year? The Honourable Member for Christchurch, East Central, is now trying to bring out the best of young Barbadians in entertainment. But Mr. Speaker, sir, his journey would have been a lot easier if we had been able to use the pre-existing trade relations so that these folks have ease of access across the Caribbean. Which one of them has ease of access into the Dominican Republic today, Mr. Speaker, sir? Tell me. And that is the way in which we have failed our people at individual level. But if we had empowered them, they would have been going abroad to earn money in, yes, foreign exchange. A country that was on its knees and could not find foreign exchange, sir, because they only understood this thing in a limited and blinkered way, not unleashing the creative potential of our youth and our people so as to be able to earn foreign exchange and then have wealth repatriated to the shores of Barbados. All of that we have had to confront and now seek to change and correct. And it is, how many years later? 11 years later. 11 years of squandered opportunity, Mr. Speaker, sir. Financial services agreement. We have not even gone to the stage yet where we have removed the restrictions, sir, that are on banking and insurance and other financial services in this region. How can you seriously be talking about integrating a region when you have credit unions here that can't be a credit union next door? I And if you were serious about doing it, Mr. Speaker, so you give leadership to it because you want to make sure that your people can broaden pools of resources, can be part of a broader sphere of capital investment. And then at that point, sir, the sophistication and understanding of what all high levels of commercial activity is about becomes a natural thing for our people. And you will not have to have the Honourable Member for St. George South, as he must now do, go back to basics and start to introduce in every community financial literacy classes, helping every small businessman to understand how you take out a mortgage, how, sir, you can get extensions on your loans, how you can refinance a loan. These are things that our people, from the smallest to the largest, must be able to feel comfortable with. Otherwise, you're condemning them to financial death and falling into pitfalls along the way because, sir, they simply have not been properly trained and exposed. But we had all the developmental aid at our disposal from Europe. It was a tool for development.
I remember.
Bill,
you know, I was wondering if when I said two, you were thinking 2 squared or 2.
I thought you said 22.
I said two, I wonder if you think 2 squared.
I thought you said 22, sir. But in wrapping up...
Or 2 ad infinitum. I was wondering if you were thinking that, sir.
In wrapping up, Mr. Speaker, sir, the reality is that if we see this as an opportunity for economic development, then we see, sir, an opportunity for our people to progress. In the end of the day, that is all trade is about, and all a developmental trade agreement is about. It is about people progressing, and the Europeans, sir, were offering us the aid to assist us in getting to that point. That we have squandered opportunity, sir, is a tragedy. What we must not fail to do is to capitalize on every opportunity that we now have with this new agreement that we are forging with the United Kingdom. I am obliged to you, sir.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to support this matter that is now before this Honourable Chamber and to congratulate the Honourable Member for St. James South in providing for us a very comprehensive understanding of what is at stake, of the opportunities that this country unfortunately lost because of lack of stewardship of the last decade, but also what we stand to gain once we continue the action that this administration has already started to take in this area. I rise, sir, in my brief intervention to really draw our attention to 2 matters, 2 opportunities that may have been lost, that perhaps with a different Prime Minister and with a different government may have been lost, but that remain available to us and on which we have to take action. I would like to draw the attention of this Honourable Chamber, sir, to a program that we have discussed before. The Barbados Competitiveness Program was based on a loan that the government of Barbados took under the last administration for US $10 million. And this competitiveness program was meant, sir, to deliver many of the things that the Honourable Member for St. James South spoke to us about, and the Honourable Member for St. James Central in his more recent intervention. It was meant to deliver, build capacity, and take advantage of opportunities in the area of trade logistics and trade facilitation and several other areas. But having taken the loan and having had to repay the loan with interest, we find ourselves not having been able to take advantage or not having settled and completed many of the critical activities that were needed at that time. And we seem to, well, the last administration seems to have to believe, sir, that you have all the time in the world to be able to move, to take advantage of economic growth. But you do not. In the 10 years that we have missed so many opportunities, we heard about the case of the Dominican Republic and all they were able to do to take advantage of the markets. The world moves at a set pace. It is not waiting for us. And so, what we find ourselves now having to do, having borrowed $10 million that we've had to pay back, we find ourselves now still having to finish many of the activities that were started, and that, in fact, in the records of the government of Barbados, are marked as completed, but from which we fail to see any benefits. And I'll go into some of the details, sir. We just had a meeting today with respect to our statistics, the data that the country generates, and what are some of the gaps. Under the Barbados Competitiveness Program that should have been implemented over a 4-year period under the last administration, there are several areas of unfinished business, including the generation of data. We talked in our discussions today on the matter of statistics and all of the gaps that exist. We talked about the generation of something called a supply and use table. And a supply and use table is an instrument that allows you to be able to really maximize on what is happening and on your understanding of what is happening with productive activity and growth in the country. And one of the questions that was asked in the meeting is, well, where are we with the generation of our supply and use table? And the answer that came back was that we had one for 2016, but it is incomplete, it is not finished. And this, sir, was one of the deliverables that we should have gotten if the Barbados Competitiveness Program was properly implemented. And at that point, I want to emphasize something that the 2 honourable members who spoke before me mentioned. And it is that it is not enough to sit down and write a project. It is not enough to sign an agreement and say, yes, we are part of this or we are part of that. One has to act. You are called the executive of government because you are called on to execute. Not just to put on a jacket and sit in an office and drive in a big car. But regrettably, the execution part of that equation was something that the last administration found it hard to come to terms with. And so under this competitiveness program, we failed to generate a supply and use table that we can use. And now we find ourselves where? We find ourselves struggling with our national accounts and with merely being able to say whether and to what extent the country has grown. Similarly, one of the other deliverables that the program was meant to realize has to do with the revenue implications of tax incentives. If you look across the 4 components of that program, sir, I have the documentation here, you will see all of the deliverables that were meant to enhance the country's competitiveness. We recently, sir, as a part of this administration in the last 18 months, we recently commissioned a study that was very quickly completed by the Inter-American Development Bank on the issue of tax expenditure. How much does it cost the country in terms of the incentives that we grant? That study was very, very quickly done. And it has put us now in a position to be able to reframe our fiscal incentives framework, to be able to rewrite and harmonize how we offer incentives, on what basis we do so, and what is it that we stand to lose or gain by so doing. And so when you look at the records of this project generated by the last administration, we saw that that study was cancelled. I have my own thoughts about why it was cancelled. Because if you give visibility to the issue of how tax incentives were granted under the last administration, a lot of things would have come to light that I dare say would mean that people do not have the comfort of freedom that they have today. But we knew why it was cancelled. But this administration came to service on a platform of transparency and accountability. And the reason that we made sure that we could very quickly get an understanding with the support of the IDB on what it costs us or what we stand to lose or gain from the incentives that we grant, is because we believe in that spirit of transparency and accountability. We have no secrets from the people of this country. We were able to execute that study, and on that basis now, have started to revise and harmonize the range of incentives that are offered to investors, local and foreign alike. And we are able to do so, sir, having converged our international and domestic corporation tax rates, to be able to offer such a competitive corporation tax regime that we do not now need to sell off the whole world to investors in order to make our product competitive. We can now offer the lowest OECD-compliant tax jurisdiction in the world, so that then, being a part of an IMF program, we do not have to lose as much as the last administration certainly was losing based on the giveaways in which they engaged with respect to fiscal incentives. But sir, that was a study that was cancelled as part of this program. That is a missed opportunity. They know why they needed to miss it. But it came at a cost to this country. Tax expenditure is a cost. The more you lose in tax expenditure, the more you lose in revenue that you have not been able to collect because you've granted waivers and concessions, the less you have to invest in the people of this country. The less you have to invest in community-based sports and cultural programs that we need desperately to be able to re-engage young people again. The less you have to invest in the healthcare system. And that is why we had to, as a matter of mission-critical importance, had to come to service in this country and immediately invest in the Accident and Emergency Department of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, because it was in shambles. And we continue to have to invest in healthcare in various ways. We continue to have to realize new partnerships with the private sector, because we realize that we are not in a position to be able to provide 100% health care coverage without partnership with the private sector in a way that currently exists, but that we now have to institutionalize and formalize. Under the trade logistics and trade facilitation component of this competitiveness program, for which this government spent, the last government spent over $10 million and realized very little. It was supposed to deliver a cargo examination facility, designs and plans and all kinds of various analyses for a cargo examination facility. But we know, sir, that when we came to service as a Barbados Labour Party administration, that we heard that only 6% of goods coming through the port were being scanned. So having taken a part of this loan to improve cargo examination in this country, we still only ended up in 2018, after 4 years of execution of a program, at 6%. We know the risks that that represents and that are manifesting today in this country. But that you could take $10 million US of taxpayers' money in this country that was meant to, among other things, improve their own safety and security and sense of well-being, and have nothing to show for it, is unconscionable, sir. The program was meant to deliver the electronic single window that the Honourable Member for St. George South now has to reintroduce and come to terms with again. This electronic single window, sir, the money was spent. And a few months ago, when I tried to log on to the website, the link is there for all to see. But when you try to log on to the website, sir, you get an error message. I would say there's no greater error message in our common understanding today, sir, than the last administration. That is completely the metaphor for their term in office. This electronic single window, sir, is a trade facilitation mechanism, along with things like a trusted trader program and other mechanisms that the honourable colleagues in here are now working through within their ministries, that would allow us to improve the time of processing of goods, that would allow people who are seeking to trade with Barbados to be able to do it all in one place at one time without having to go to various entities to be able to do their business. This, sir, is part, now again, of the efforts to improve the investment climate and the doing business environment that my ministry and this government are engaged in. And we, on that score, sir, have established a doing business subcommittee of cabinet that's chaired by the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, the Honourable Prime Minister. And it is a mechanism, sir, that sees every single minister who has responsibility for some part of improving the doing business environment according to the targets that we've set, defining a roadmap to get us there, and the Prime Minister monitoring that execution to make sure that we are getting there. That is what implementation looks like, sir. You cannot just sign an agreement and turn your back and think that things are going to fall into place. It requires leadership. But, sir, we have, again, found ourselves having to complete all of the unfinished business of the last administration, but we will complete it for the good of this country and for the good of Barbadians, because that is what the people of Barbados elected us to do. I want to turn, though, sir, to another opportunity that relates to how we are able to encourage Barbadians to expand their access to markets and to be able, as entrepreneurs and small businesses, to be able to benefit from investment by this government. The Enterprise Growth Fund Limited, sir, is another one of the entities that is a part of the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Investment, and that has done its best and performed admirably in being able to, through the management of certain funds, provide funding opportunities to small businesses in this country. Enterprise Growth Fund Limited currently manages 7 funds: the Agricultural Development Fund, the Energy Smart Fund, the Export Promotion and Marketing Fund, the Industrial Investment and Employment Fund. It manages an Innovation Fund, as well as a Small Hotels Investment Fund and a Tourism Loan Fund. And as I've gone through that list, sir, you can see the importance of some of these areas of economic activity to this country and therefore to Barbadians who are seeking to earn a living through entrepreneurship. But, sir, the Enterprise Growth Fund Limited stood, as it is structured, or as it was structured, to be able to add so much more value to the lives of Barbadians who are seeking to become entrepreneurs and to grow their businesses in this country. The Agricultural Development Fund, for example, is now in a position, having seen a small recapitalization, to be able to support some of the small farmers, sir, who have identified themselves to be a part of the feed program that the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security has initiated, but who might need a bit more financing to be able to scale up their ideas. But, sir, EGFL, as it currently stands, cannot go much further without recapitalization. And this has been the basis of several discussions that we have had with entities like IDB Invest, which is the private sector arm of the Inter-American Development Bank, and others who are interested in helping to mobilize domestic and regional savings to be able to recapitalize some of these funds that really are the only opportunity to help grow the productive sectors in this country again. So that, as we have discussed the legislation, sir, to establish medicinal cannabis as an industry in this country, recapitalization of the Agricultural Development Fund would mean that those small farmers in Barbados, those entrepreneurs who are interested in the sector, will now have access to the kind of funding that will allow them to take part in the country's economic growth. But, sir, these are the kinds of opportunities in which one has to invest. And EGFL, sir, had it been invested in more significantly and with more creativity in the last decade, as a part of the government's commitment to the EPA and to its implementation, would see itself today in a much better position to fulfill its mandate to those productive sectors. But, sir, it is an opportunity that we will not lose. And so we have begun the process of helping to reorganize and attempting to recapitalize EGFL so that it can play this very important role in setting the country up and setting Barbadians up to be a part of the country's inclusive growth. Sir, I have said that I would not be long on this matter, and so I have very few words with which to close. And it is to say simply this. The extent to which we can achieve growth now, the extent to which we can include regular Barbadians in growth now, is our ultimate test as a government. It is regrettable that the last administration did not see that as their role and function and duty, not just to this generation, but to future generations. However, sir, this government, this administration, not only sees it as our duty, but is engaged in the process of execution so that the time for lost opportunity is over. And the time to be able to have only regret but no output or outcomes is over. And so we as a government, sir, recommit to the activities, to the actions that are going to make sure that Barbadians stand to benefit from the growth in this country. And with those few words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable St. James South.
He says he's not going. All right. Mr. Speaker, I just want to thank my colleagues for their contributions to this particular bill. And I am hoping that the message has gotten through from what the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central, the Honourable Member from St. James Central, that the message goes out loud and clear. We have work to do to turn around this economy, to build out capacity in our enterprises, and to be able to utilize more effectively all of the opportunities that are around us within the CSME, the opportunities presented with the development cooperation funding that's available to us, and to get down to the work and the business of this nation. There is no higher honor that we could have than to have been selected by the people of Barbados to represent them and represent their interests and to execute their interests in a responsible, focused way. And this is the promise that we, the government, the Barbados Labour Party administration, the government of Barbados, this is our pledge to the people of Barbados. And I want to again thank the Chamber and you for your consideration on this bill. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the bill be read a second time. And I beg, oops, no, is it? No, sorry.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. Honorable member, City Bridgetown.
Mr. Deputy Speaker. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, my apologies. I beg to move or to request that the honourable member for St. Michael West Central be appointed as temporary chairman of committees for today.
The question is that the honorable member for St. Michael West Central be appointed temporary chairman of committees for the remainder of the day sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The honorable member for St. Michael West Central is so appointed.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that you do now leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the honorable speaker do leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is in committee.
I beg that Clause 1 stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. The ayes have it.
Clause 2, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
I beg to move that Clause 3 stands part.
The question is that Clause 3 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
I beg to move that Clause 4 stand part.
Seconder? Yeah. The question is that Clause 4 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
I beg to move that Clause 5 stand part.
The question is that Clause 5 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
I beg to move that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Economic Partnership Agreement between the Caribbean Community, the Dominican Republic, and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland Act of 2019.
The question is that this bill be now passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is now passed and so cited. Honourable member City of Bridgetown.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of the sitting until 10 minutes to 4 this afternoon.
The question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 10 minutes to 4. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 10 minutes to 4.